Well, good evening, everybody. We're kind of limited in numbers tonight, but I thought what I would do is present and share and get some of your feedback. We did a budget presentation on Tuesday night. You received actually the document on Friday. There has been no changes to that document other than fixing 2 typos. The New York State budget has not been approved as of yet, if you follow that good stuff. I was curious. I thought maybe today, because I knew the legislative extenders ended was through today, so they could continue business in New York State. But rumors are having it probably late afternoon tomorrow. Will we see any more dollars? I don't know. I saw, one other that possibly we get a little bit more. That would be always a good thing. Right now, the numbers that you'll see are the January numbers. We did run some new figures. We really took into consideration inflationary costs. We are seeing some increases in costs, which I'll share in a couple of minutes, just more globally. We did add 2 FTEs, FTE, and I'll explain those in a few minutes as well. So I'll get you up to speed. So I'm going to go to present mode here, which I don't normally do. So when I go to present mode, I can't see you anymore. So if you have a question, just speak up because I can't see you. It's not that I just enjoy talking, but I just can't see you. So we're gonna go to presentation mode here to a window, and hopefully I can make this thing work for us. All right, and I'm going to look away because my screen is almost black, so I can see my main screen a little better. So if I'm turning to my right, it's not that I'm looking away, but that's where the information is for me. So this is a presentation we did this past Tuesday night, and really it's apropos to the work of this committee and your feedback. In this proposal, in the presentation, we talked about budget parameters, which you've seen before, budget assumptions, estimated budget revenues, which we really have spent a great deal of time, especially the budget office. There's a new face on here this evening that you haven't met before. It's Danielle DeBlasi. She's our new budget manager down there. And she's gone through and did really a 5-year, 6-year snapshot backwards at our revenues as well as our expenditures, because COVID really throws things off when you're really trying to do predictions. So I appreciate the work there. So I think this is one of the tighter budgets that we've had. So with the inflation, that's important. Our proposed budget, and then just a reminder about what our federal stimulus is, and then important dates. The budget committee is tonight. We have a Board of Education regular business meeting on the 19th, which will bring back any adjustments, final recommendations to the board. The City of Bosse's administrative vote is on the 25th. So in case we need to make adjustments after the 19th, we do have a scheduled meeting required through BOCES that we all vote on the same night. So that vote happens to be on Monday, April 25th. We can add to that agenda if necessary. It puts us close to our newsletter, which is due into the processing by the 28th, but gives us enough time. The budget hearing is May 3rd. The budget vote is May 17th, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. down at the Fulton War Memorial. And then we would have a special meeting on the 18th to hopefully ratify a passed budget. So with that, we'll go through it. We always have our mission and vision, and we've talked about this at other meetings. We come back to our strategic coherence plan. So that's always there for our reference as the direction that we're always going. We're trying to strive towards reaching and achieving and attaining and actually exceeding each one of those as well. Next slide is our beliefs and our guiding principles, which also go along with our site-based plan, our strategic coherence plan. And then always our reminder about what coherence is. And it's really around collective understanding, collective commitment to something. And it focuses on, I'm really feeling like it's becoming part of the district, because often discussions I'm in now have a focused direction. We're cultivating that culture around what do we need to do, deepening learning, what do we need to do for as far as resources, professional development, so on and so forth. And then the accountability part are built in. And I'm hearing that in more and more things that we're embarking on. And that means it's becoming part of who we are. And that's really what that process does. So that's exciting to see. The next part is our coherence plan, strategic intents, which are really the goals in each of the areas. Those haven't changed from the plan. And then as you've seen at previous meetings, we've got the budget parameters that were established by the Board of Education, started in December, finished in January. You've seen these before. in the areas, and they align to each of the areas of our strategic coherence plan. And if you remember each one of these, if you have constituents or you have questions, like for example, in literacy, we can actually go to this, click right on it, and you can actually, it'll take you right to the report down here in the corner, and then we can actually enlarge it, and you can actually see the report that was actually presented to the Board of Education on this one. Literacy was presented on December 14th, and there's ties back to our federal monies, how the monies are being used, some of the major initiatives. So for example, letters has been a big initiative for us, as well as, that goes into the simple views of reading. And then this presentation also included the pie chart, and it shows that, in the area of literacy, 9% of the federal funds are driven there, coupled with 22% in instruction, social emotional. And you can actually go to each of those reports and see what was done there. So what's nice is it's the first time we've been able to link previous reports. So it just makes it at ease. They're also listed on our budget page on the website. So let's see here. So we're there. Then we have instruction, social, emotional, developmental health. They're listed along with their budget parameters and those reports and those dates. And then finally, family engagement and innovation and those budget parameters that were affiliated there. So we've been through those before, so I'm not going to go through them again. The newest slide that you haven't seen before is really our budgetary assumptions. And, with that, and Dom or Danielle, you can always pop in. Budgetary assumptions are record inflation means each dollar buys less. So we saw that with our capital improvement where we made adjustments, and our adjustments, knock on wood, have been really good so far. We're on budget, and we've been getting a lot of work done, and we chose resources that we could get our hands on. So that's good news. And at good expenditure at good prices. Continued supply chain issues also. The graph shows the increases and the energy increases. You can see there, this is a 12-month percentage change consumer price index. And the categories are all items, food, energy, and all items less food and energy. And you can see energy is a big cost. So that's fuel oil, that's heating, that's all of things that are associated with energy, the buses, so on and so forth. And then food has actually increased in access to food as far as our nutrition programs. And then all other items are riding right around 7%. So we've taken all of that into consideration to build a budget where there's enough flexibility to ensure that we can hopefully address those issues, and hopefully inflation starts to reduce, although there is some predictions it'll go well through 2022 into 23. So this budget takes that into consideration. On the next slide, we really took a really good look at our estimated revenues. And the reason for that was we wanted a real good handle on where we were at, what we're predicting to come in. In the past, you had a little bit more flexibility here, but this year there's not. We wanted to watch this very closely. So our foundation aid, which was the first line, if you remember, that went up 5.5%, or 38 to 38,606,000. And that's a 5.5% increase, or in dollars, $2,001,000. So $2,001,000 was the increase there. So that increase resulted in an overall total of $54,687,058. That doesn't include the pre-K, which is a targeted amount of money. We have to use that for pre-K. So it can't be used. So we've pulled that out for the first time, because in the past we've rolled it in. And I think it doesn't really do it the right justice. I wanted to keep it on the radar because the price, or the expenditures and the cost this year with inflation may be tighter. So I wanted to pull this right out of the top and make sure it's there. And so we generally get very close to that. Last year was a little bit lower, and our run came back at about $497,000 in actual costs. So this year's budget puts the 657 back in. That number has been static. We have asked for that number at small cities to be increased to the state of New York. Unfortunately, that has remained flat for now 6 years at least. That's my 6 years. So that's a little disconcerting, but we've made that 657 work here in Fulton, and we'll continue to do so. And the challenge put forth by the board when I first arrived here, and it continues, is no monies are taken out of the general fund to support UPK. So these are targeted monies. It's like a grant, but it's part of the foundation monies that I wanted that there. Other revenues. So the total revenues we have is $77,889,363. This is with a zero tax levy increase. So if you said, how much money do you have to work with? We have $77,889,363. So we'll move forward. So breaking that down into the way that that money could be distributed within those revenues, the $78,889,360, we're projecting a budget of, let me go on here, of $78,859,000. So in a minute, I'll through that in just a moment. So our budget we're predicting is $78,859,000. Our revenues are projected at $77,889,000. You'll see in a moment that that's a $970,000 discrepancy. So that's, and I'll go through that in just a moment. So our three-part budget with a $78,859,000 is 10.4% administration, 74.7% program, capital 14.9%. So the actual administrative budget, because that always comes up, administrators specifically, that's 12.34 in the current budget. It's 12.21 in the next budget. So we've actually decreased the administrative aspect by a small percentage. Because that question always comes up, so we added it right to the slide. I'm going to go through this slide, and then I'll go through one more after this, and two more actually, and then we'll have some discussion. So this budget that we're recommending is 3.45% increase. Last year's was 3.3, the current one, so slightly higher. Taking into consideration, we did make some adjustments already. We were able to reduce some areas and make some adjustments and go from there. So this budget is $2.6 million higher than it was. It also takes into consideration contract costs. We are in the process of negotiating some contracts, so we've built that in here. Salary and benefits. We've added a speech pathologist based on individual educational plans and needs. That's been something we've been watching very closely over the last couple of years. So at this point, it looks like the best move is to add that speech pathologist. We're also adding a PE health teacher, dual certification, because of health and PE needs. This budget maintains all programs and supports, so there's no reduction in force either. Just to give you a perspective, 1% increase on the tax levy generates $216,000. A 2% increase provides $432,000, or at a 2%, and just a little bit extra, $432,266. So our budgets, to look at this. So our state aid, the 0% increase is on the left. It demonstrates the total revenues of $77,889,363. That's with 0% change in our tax levy. And remember, we had 0% in the current year as well. With a proposed budget of $78,859,000, brings us in with a shortfall of $970,000. At a 1% increase, that would reduce that deficit to $753,000, or the shortfall. And then finally, at a 2% would be $537,000 deficit. Our tax cap is 2.43%. That would take us to $525,000 additional dollars, and it would bring us down closer into the fours. And then what we would do is any of the differences between tax levy and the 990, we would cover with reserves and fund balance. So are there any questions? Thoughts? There's a lot of information there. I apologize. And then the other slide I wanted to bring attention to, in the current budget we have right now, $356,000 was used for fund balance and reserves. So we started this current budget with a $356,000 hole. So now we have a $970,000 hole as well. The other thing I do want to point out is that there's 5.5% increase on what we had was $36 million in foundation aid. Now we have 38, so 5.5 on that. That's really just under half of our money. Think about 36 million out of 78 million, and 68.5% total comes from the state of New York. But the only thing that really changes is the foundation aid, because all the other costs are fixed. they're based on the previous year. So the only percentage increases really are in foundation aid that we can anticipate or work with. So that's the how we have to deal with this. So think about that we're taking a very small part of the money with that increase. That's why the tax levies are really important to discuss. Any questions or thoughts? So one of the things that on the next slide, we just want to remind, I think one of the challenges in our community this year is, I know that Fulton went through a reassessment of properties. And what we wanted to make sure is everybody understands the district isn't really, we're not responsible for determining property assessments, the city or town tax rates, or the equalization rates. So there is the possibility that taxes may actually go down depending on tax rates and equalization rates. We don't know. We don't set those. So that's important. What we did do for the board the other night, and we're doing for the budget committee now, is that we wanted to just give you some estimates, an impact of 1% tax levy based on what we know. And so we looked at that. And so for 1% on a $70,000 home, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $11.14. At a $100,000 assessment, we're looking at $19.49 at a 1%. And at a $150,000 home, $33.41 per year. And then we also calculated the same thing for a 2%. You can see those figures: 22.27 at 70,000, 38.98 at 100,000, and 66.82 for 150,000. And I think that those are important to know, because that's the actual or anticipated impacts, of that. And this is a slide that you've seen before, but if you go back to 16-17, which is right here, and you add these up over time, what you end up with, and you divide it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, we had a 0% in the current year. That comes out to an average increase of 0.56%. So we've been really responsible over the years, and that's generated these dollars here. And that's what's important. We generated 88,000 in 16-17. We lost 357,000 in 17-18 because we had a negative tax cap. We came back with $408,000 back to our tax levy, then 566 with a 2.69%. We had a 2% in 2021, which was 423, and then a 0 in the present. So really what we're looking at is, over the years, we've had the opportunity, going back to 12-13, of generating an additional $4.9 million. And we've actually, with our actuals, have generated 2.299. And I think that's an important figure to know, that, had we generated even half of that, we wouldn't be having a discussion about a gap. So again, I think the budgets have been fantastic over the years. We've been fiscally responsible. And I think they asked the other night, what would I recommend? I recommended a 2% and then fill the reserves and fund balance. There was discussion about going to the 2.43. So I think that'll be further discussion on the 19th. So that kind of brings you full circle, and gets you up to speed and where we were at with the discussions on Tuesday night with the board. And I'd like to hear from where you think, your perspectives on things and what you heard this evening. I know there's just a couple members, but what are your thoughts? Do you want me to pull the screen down? I can see some of you. So just speak up loud and proud if you have any questions, because I can't see you. So, questions?
Brian, I can completely understand the need for the increase, especially with inflation and energy prices and gas prices. I mean, I think this looks pretty reasonable for our community members. I'm curious, though, if foreshadowing for this time next year is if inflation comes back down to pre-pandemic levels, if we wouldn't necessarily need to ask our community members for so much foreshadowing for the next season.
Yeah, that's a great question, Fallon. And actually, it's similar to one that was asked at the board meeting. And so it's a very good question. One of the things that I think we have to keep in mind, and we talked about this at our last budget committee, is right now there are 30 positions on the federal dollars. There's 29 teacher positions, teacher or teacher unit, there's I believe a couple of teaching assistants as well as teachers, reading teachers, math, RTI teachers, reading RTI teachers. We have the restorative practice specialists, 29 positions there, and then we had one administrator. So our 30 positions. So the one-time expenditures are fine, purchase of desks or purchase of, anything related to air quality, so on and so forth. One-time costs, those are the kinds of things that'll last us longer than the next 3 to 5 years, obviously. But what won't is we've talked about how do we have sustainability and capacity down the road. So it came up at the board meeting is that as we think about 2 and 3 years down the road, the 24-25 budget in particular, by then we have to have any of those positions that we believe are priorities of the priorities to say we must have this position, restorative practice specialist, or we must have these extra reading or math specialists, then we've got to find a way to build them in the budget. If we had all of them, every one of those 30 positions, it would cost us approximately $2.3 to $2.4 million. So that kind of quantifies it. So what I would say in response to your question is we're building the capacity and the sustainability for the future. So we have to think about that, which is why, we don't want to, if we start doing everything out of the reserves and fund balance, the problem is that's like taking out of your savings. And once you take out of your savings, you never really are able to replenish that unless you underspend your budget. So we've been very good at that the last 2 years. So our surplus right now is about 5.4%. The state may allow us to go to 6 to 8%, but right now we're over 4%, as most districts are. So that would be my response to that. Each year is a bit different. We need to think about as a committee down the road, and next year, this will be a big discussion come next January about what are those priorities, and we've got to get positions prioritized for the next year budget, for the 23-24 budget. And that's why we need to be looking long-term about our revenues coming in. We know that pretty sure next year we'll get another $2,001,000. We also know that $2,001,000 this year still resulted in a $970,000 gap. So it's about the future as well as, so to answer it is hard. I hope our figures hold. That would allow us to have a little bit more flexibility. So hopefully inflation, we anticipated correctly. That's a great question, Fallon. And that's the same answer I gave the other night. So I am very worried about, I think we're doing all the right things right now with our federal dollars. I think we're starting to see some of the impacts. But I think we'll see the real impacts come by the end of the year and into the fall of 22, into that winter. That's when we're going to reap the benefits of all of these positions. It's going to take us about a year to get our feet underneath us. And we're seeing some of our kids with wider gaps than others. And we're seeing kids that we've never had, they've never presented, kind of social, emotional, or academic. We're seeing profiles of kids that's a little bit different than we've seen. Kids that are struggling that haven't struggled before. And I'm glad we have the resources in place. What I want to make sure is when we look at this back, 5 years from now, we can look back and say, wow, we're in good shape because we did this and we're still poised to continue what we're doing here in Fulton. Then we'll know we did the right thing. I wish I had a crystal ball. Great question. Other thoughts or questions? I just want to remind everybody all the time that, everybody says, wow, you got $15.9 million. Yeah, we did. Already, the CARES money was gone during our COVID year. It helped us balance our budget that year because we had to pay people even though we weren't doing service. There was a lot of things that we had to do. And now we're working with the CRRSA, the CRISA, and the ARP. But again, one-time monies. And just to remind you, these were the areas, the way it's allocated, in the current year, the way we've got it distributed by SCP, and you can see the way it's distributed out there. So, it's going to be we've got it balanced out for 3 years. But again, that's 3 years of one-time money. So we always like to remind everybody that one-time monies only last once. So other questions or thoughts? I mean, I think one of the things that's important is we're not reducing any of our programs or initiatives for kids. We're not reducing our workforce. In fact, we're keeping it strong. And I think we have to. And we were already lean going into all of this. I think our teachers and our staff, they do a fantastic job. Our administration does a fantastic job. And I think any of us would say this has probably been one of the most challenging years as educators we've ever had. I think we thought when COVID started to let up, it was going to get a little bit, it would balance out a little bit. In fact, it's been interesting getting the gears going again. And, those that are in the schools every day would hear that. And I'm sure those of you that have kids in our schools, your kids are having good, interesting experiences, different experiences before. And I don't think anybody thought we'd still be dealing with COVID in our schools as late as April of 2022. I sure didn't. I thought maybe, but I didn't see this last little push in the last couple of weeks coming. I was hoping we'd put it behind us, but I think we're doing okay. But it's still impacting attendance and things like that, and we're battling through that. I was on a small cities call yesterday, and I actually brought up, and many of my peers, and this was with the state commissioner yesterday. I sit on the board of directors for the state of New York for small cities. And I brought up, nobody ever talks about the fact, one, they said, how'd the testing go? And I said, well, considering the second day had 6 essays for the 3rd to 6th graders, it wasn't real a positive experience. And that was the same thing other school districts said for kids. It was just too long. And then we talked about the fact that nobody took into consideration the fact that we have a lot of kids that have increased chronic absenteeism. We have an increase, and many of my peers across the state echoed that same sentiment. So we're still dealing with getting kids fully engaged and getting back into routines. So there's a range, and I think this budget provides the supports to be able to do this. And I think, we need to start our budget committee a little bit earlier next year, probably come December, so that we can really start digging into what needs to get over from the federal side into the general side and still be able to maintain all of the good things that we have in our general budget, because it's a lean, mean budget that we had. It's always been tight, but I will tell you what we're offering our kids in our district is pretty amazing compared to some of our peers in the county and compared to other districts outside the county. I want to compare us to all the school districts in the state. And I think we're starting to make some pretty significant gains with opportunities that we're providing kids and staff here in Fulton. Full-time mental health in all of our schools. I will tell you, other schools are desperate for that. And we built that before COVID. So we got to maintain it. So that's one. And we were one of the few districts that had a full one-on-one initiative going before COVID. Who knew that was going to come either? So there are some things that we had in place in our plan. And the social emotional was being developed well before I got here. So there's some amazing things. What we can't do is take a step backwards. So
Brian, I'm sorry, I just have one more question too. I was thinking, right now in the national news, there's a lot of reporting about students either going to private education or homeschooling now. Are we seeing that in our district? Are we losing students to homeschooling?
So at a presentation we did, and I'd have to go back and look which one it was, we showed an increase from about 108 a year to about 122. So not a significant change. There has been some families that were doing fully remote last year that chose to go to some homeschooling. I think that's been the only difference. So when we did that presentation, and as I said, I'd have to look back to see which board docket was on or which meeting, but it was earlier in the year, and I believe it was right around that number. Our enrollment continues to go down about 50 a year. Right now, we were at 3102. I'd have to look at that. I believe it was 3102. We've lost a few kids in the last couple of weeks. I think right now we're riding right around 3,080, 3,090. So we've been holding about 50 a year. In fact, we went up a little this year. So we've kind of leveled out a little bit. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Another great question. You're full of them tonight, Fallon. You're on a roll. Thank you. Other
I always am.
questions? Other questions or thoughts or?
Brian?
Yes.
In the budget that you just went over, none of the stimulus money is going into that?
So
For the extra 30 positions that we're gonna?
So the 30 positions are already covered by the federal stimulus. So that's
Okay.
all covered by them. So any of those 30, so that the federal stimulus dollars are not to be used to fill in your general budget. So our general budget, this is all the staffing that we had plus those 2 new positions. And then taking into consideration contractual obligations that we have, coupled with any inflationary. Obviously, we keep a very close eye on benefits, in particular medical benefits. I think our district does a very nice job monitoring that. So right now we're on target for our budget, actually a little low, which is good. But a couple of years ago we were over. So it really depends. But right now we're looking good there. So we took all that. And then separate, Nick, all of those positions we have right now are on the 15 million, and they're completely in the budget for the federal dollars for next year as well as the year after.
Okay.
Great question. But again, if we want to continue those positions beyond that, we have to figure out a way to get those into our general budget. Another good question.
Would that be done through normal attrition, retirees, and?
So some of that would be the people that we could absorb, because the people could be absorbed through retirements and things like that. But if we were going to, I wish I could get to it quickly. So we did a presentation, I want to say 2 board meetings ago, on staffing. And there are pages in there. So for example, it'll say elementary, it'll say, let's say RTI reading and math, and it'll say 10 will be in black. And then I think it has 3 in red. That's ELA. That's the reading. So it's 10 and 3. The 3 in red are the 3 red positions are federal dollars. So right now we have 10 positions in the general budget, which is exactly what we had pre-COVID. And then what we've added through federal, we did in red on the same slide, we have 3. And then it's the same thing for math. So you'll see those 30 positions you'll see them there's an elementary slide, a secondary 7th to 12th grade slide, a district slide as well, and I believe an administrative slide. So it shows on those 4 slides where the red positions are, or the federal dollar positions. So that was something the board had asked for at a previous meeting, and then we had the idea, well, let's put them right on the same slide, but actually be able to show if the budget went away right now, the federal government budget, we would be back to 10. It's kind of how that works. So when we think about this in the future, we actually can say, okay, do we have enough support in the area of reading? This is the extra support that we've been putting in place. Math, social, emotional, so on and so forth, each of the areas. Everybody has great questions tonight. I actually have answers, which is even better. So that's good. Other thoughts? I mean, I know that our community, we have a community that has a very high tax rate. It's $57 or $58 per thousand. And that's very characteristic of a small city. Not a good thing. Our wealth ratio, I was looking earlier, let me see here if I can get to this page. I'm looking at that one. So how do I get to this one? Let's see. I don't think it'll let me over here. I don't know how to get there. But anyway, there's a presentation I had that actually, or a slide that I had that actually shows how we are. Let me pull it up here, see if I can get to it here. I'm not sure it's going to let me on there. Nope, it won't. So anyway, I forgot my line of thought as I was trying to find it. What was I talking about here? Federal dollars, blah, blah, blah. Our combined wealth ratio. So our combined wealth ratio, if we go back, and what that is it's one part of the formula. One is where you're dead on, you're solid average in the state of New York. If you're higher than 1, you would be considered a district with low need and high wealth. So we're talking about some high wealth districts, such as like, on Long Island, some very high wealth, low need districts. So here's our number. In 2007-8, we were combined wealth ratio, we were 0.316. In 22-23, we are 0.27. And I don't know the other two districts off their current numbers, but I know coming in, we were the third poorest combined wealth ratio in the 5-county area. We were behind the Syracuse City School District, Hannibal, and then Fulton. And Hannibal and us were like within tenths, not even 10. I think they were 3.1 and we were 0.32. So we were that like hundredths. And so that's part of the challenge, is that we are a high need, low wealth district. And that's the challenge that we have. And we've got some pretty significant needs where other districts may not need that influx of social, emotional, mental health to the level we need, or the extra academic supports that we need, just to serve the needs of our community and our families. And I think at the same time, wanting to provide a high profile quality programs. I mean, I think we're the only ones that have a drone certification program. We have our early college high schools. We have opportunities for the other day, the job fair the other day, and all the work that we're doing around work keys for kids. These things aren't being done in other districts, but these are things that are going to be essential for our kids to be able to really get out there and be competitive, whether it's in going on for higher ed or whether it's going on for the world of work, to be prepared to be competitive and significant contributors to our community and the community at large. So, but that just tells you our wealth ratio has gone down over time. So that's actually the property wealth pupil ratio, and then the combined wealth ratio was 0.391 in F7-8, and it was 0.347 in 22-23. So we've gotten poorer, and our combined wealth ratio has gone down over the last 14 years. And I think we see that with our industry leaving and other challenges. So we take all of that into consideration. So any discussion about increases is always really looked at as what do we really need for our kids, as well as just keeping it lean, but making it sure that it's doing what it needs to do for our kids. So hard talking to a screen. I wish we were all in the same room. I could read the room better then.
Is there a list of the 30 new positions?
Yeah. Let me see if I can see if it's on the FCSD. We'll see if our website's up to date the way it should be here. Let's see. So I think I'm on. Yep, you're seeing the same thing. So I'm going to go to our budget information. Right here, 22-23 budget planning process and enrollment. Actually use the tools that are available to everyone. Look at that. All right. So let me see if this works for us. So in this presentation, obviously all of the pieces you've already seen before. Our enrollment data is in this slide. You can see that our present enrollment, this includes pre-K, is 3,258 when you include our 133 pre-K. And then our free and reduced lunch is in here. We're at 65%. That just demonstrates our wealth. And take a look. There's 11, 12, 50%. And there we are, 65% now free and reduced lunch. So a significant 15% increase. Our enrollments are at 3125 is where we're at without pre-K. This was on Beds Day back in October. Just going to slide us down through here quickly to answer your questions. All right. So these are the slides that I was talking about. You guys can see those. Okay. So on this slide, this is elementary staffing. So you'll see there was no changes in classroom teachers, art, music, PE, all of that. This is our 21-22. We're not making any adjustments. PE, if you remember, we're adding one here. So this will be 7.5. And when you look, we have 13 reading ELA reading RTI teachers. In the budget, there's 13 now, but 10 of them right here are in the general fund. In other words, they were already existing before. We've added 3 using the federal funds. For math, we had 8, and now there's 4 more. So that's 7. So there's 7 of the 30 positions, Nick, are right there. 3 in ELA, 4 in math. And they're distributed, and this is at the elementary schools. So this is distributed to the 4 elementaries. On the next slide, this is our secondary staffing. At the secondary level, we added an English teacher to support ELA and reading. We have an added ELA RTI teacher, and we have a math added. So there's those 2. So here's 3. So if you look back, we had 7 plus 3 is 10. Go to our next slide for district staffing. We added a 6th grade counselor, which is required. We've actually been trying to cobble that together, but the regulations changed a couple of years ago, and we've been meeting the regs, but it really wasn't meeting the needs of kids. So they have now access at 6th grade to a counselor, and they do all of the initial career counseling. So it's actually getting kids starting to think about the future and starting to think about graduation pathways, of which there are, I believe, 47 different pathways and opportunities for kids, and really thinking about that programming as they start to go through middle school into high school. So that's that position. We added a nurse who's over at our lab. So over at the Lanigan lab, we added a registered nurse. At the and that's been one of the best things that we've done. That's been a great opportunity for our staff and our families when they need testing. We added 4 teaching assistants to our program. So that's 1, 2, 4 teaching assistants. That's 6 positions. And then we needed an additional TESOL, which is our teachers of English as a second language kids, or other than English kids. So we needed to add. We were actually short-staffed there, so we needed to add that. So if you add that to the previous 10, that's another 6, 7. So we're up to 17. And then we have our district staffing, which is we added 3 instructional coaches, 2.5 interdisciplinary specialists. Those are at the high school, junior high. Restorative practice specialists. This is that SEL, shot in the arm, at 5 of the schools. And we added a district intervention team facilitator who's really trying to lead and work with our multi-tiered systems of supports. So that's, we're up to 17. What is that? 17 and a half. That's 22 and a half, 27 and a half, 28, 29. Or then we got this here's 29. And then our last page is the additional special education program support, which we added in December when we found that we'd added nothing in the area of special education and early childhood. So this position is really helping with special education support this year. This position is evolving into the new director of early childhood, and that will support all early childhood special education, pre-K or birth really through 2nd grade. And this will put a lens, because I'm very concerned about our pre-K to 2 kids. We really need to put a lens on them. We're seeing that group of kids has had a very interrupted experience. Think about it. 2nd graders didn't have a typical kindergarten nor 1st grade, and here we are in 2nd grade. So this is an essential position right now. So that adds up to 30, Nick, if my math's right. I'm just glad I could put my hands on it. That means the information is accessible. So that was a great question. But those are the 30 positions that FTE-wise that we really need to think about. The other piece is a program that's out there, which is our Peaceful Schools, that's gotten a lot of positive feedback in all 6 of our schools. In fact, we expanded it to our high school after school started, and we've been getting some pretty positive feedback impacts. That's all like small group work at our schools. That tier 2 support, an area where we weren't doing, we had a hole there. So that's another piece, and that's to the tune of, that's a contract that we contract through the Peaceful Schools. So that's another piece. So those are the kinds of things that we need to take in consideration as we build the next budget after this one. Great questions. Other questions or thoughts? things that if you were a taxpayer, gee, I would really need to know this, because we are putting those videos together that, they're almost done, a couple of them. So we're working on those as well. So what other things that you're like, we really need to emphasize or help taxpayers through? Obviously I have a public forum on May 3rd. I have presentations probably on the 19th and 25th. Everything's live stream, which is very different than we've had in the past. So people can actually tune in and watch me or the team presenting. The key for me is I want to make sure that our teams and our schools have everything they need to roll come July 1 and do the work that needs to be in the summer, as well as get us ready to roll for September. I think this is going to be as pivotal as 22, 23 was to getting back rolling and back going and back our feet back under us. I believe next year is going to be that pivotal year, because our feet should be back underneath us, and then it's ready to run and roll, because we got lots of kids and we got to get them all rolling together. And that's going to be a challenge. As I said, there's more kids with more needs than we've ever had before. So unique and different. Questions or thoughts or any other things that you'd like to add? So I think it's a fair budget. Again, if you have any constituents or you have questions, get them to me. Let's Talk on the website is dedicated to budget, so people can write Let's Talk. They can email me. They can call me. They can call Dr. Lisi in the budget office. Send them our way. And the other piece we'll post those answers, because chances are if one person has that question, others will too, and I'll weave them into presentations in the future as well. Dom or Danielle, anything I forgot tonight?
I think that covers it.
Okay. Any other questions for the good of the order? Our meetings always seem to go about an hour, so we seem to be around there. If any of our peers, I will, reach out to any of the budget committee if they have questions, spread the word. But please send people our way. I don't want anybody that has any questions out there. I want to be able to answer them. And if I can't, we'll find the answers or figure it out. Okay. There's everybody. Hi, everybody. So, all right. Well, then I would say if there's no other questions or discussion, please let us know. Your feedback has been terrific, and keep thinking about the budget down the road. As I said, we may need to convene earlier this committee next year, so we can really reflect on the impacts of these positions and start to collect evidence. We're going to do surveys. We're going to collect more information other than just the data that we see, reading and math and, all that kind of good stuff, and data from the kids, but also qualitative data through surveys from families and staff. That'll also be a part of information we collect to try to get a handle on what are the priorities of the priorities of the priorities that we got to get in. So, all righty. Well, I appreciate your time tonight on this rainy evening. Good night for a meeting anyway, right? I appreciate all you've done. We will continue to send you information as we roll things out. And as we get the new numbers, hopefully this weekend, we'll forward, all that information to you as well as to the board. Hopefully, and if anything, I hope it goes up a little bit. That would be nice. I'll take every dollar we can get. So, all righty. Well, thank you so much. Have a great holiday. If you're going away, have a great recess. And thank you so much for all your input. Have a great evening. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
All right.